Marcia Dandridge thought she was going to die alone in that falling-apart house, until 500 leather-clad bikers pulled up to her front yard and the man leading them called her name. It started with a sound, a deep, rolling rumble that shook the floorboards beneath her feet. At first, she thought it was thunder, one of those Alabama storms that came out of nowhere and tore through Montgomery Creek like an angry fist. But when she stepped onto her sagging porch, broom still in hand, she realized it wasn't thunder at all. It was engines, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. The rumble grew louder, vibrating through her chest, rattling the windows of her small, weathered house. The peeling paint on the shutters seemed to tremble. Her breath caught in her throat as the street in front of her home began to fill. Motorcycles, chrome gleaming under the midday sun, rolling in like a slow, unstoppable wave. Leather jackets, tattoos, the unmistakable insignia of Hell's Angels stitched across broad backs. Marcia's hands tightened around the broom handle. Her heartbeat hammered in her ears. What in God's name? Across the street, Mrs. Calloway's curtains twitched. Old man Henderson stepped onto his porch, eyes wide, mouth hanging open. Dogs barked from behind chain-link fences. The entire town of Montgomery Creek seemed to freeze, caught between fear and disbelief. The motorcycles lined both sides of the narrow street, engines idling in perfect unison. The air itself seemed to vibrate with raw power. And then, as if on cue, the engines cut off, one by one, until the only sound left was the soft whisper of wind through the trees. Silence. Marcia stood rooted to her porch, her mind racing. She'd lived in this town her whole life. She knew every face, every family, every story. But this was something else entirely. A tall man stepped forward from the sea of leather and steel. He moved with quiet authority, his boots heavy on the cracked pavement. He reached up and pulled off his helmet, revealing a rugged face with deep brown eyes and a scar along his jawline. A woman stepped beside him, graceful, confident, holding a bouquet of wildflowers like she was walking into a wedding, not a showdown. The man's eyes locked onto Marcia's. "Miss Marcia Dandridge?" he called out, his voice steady but thick with emotion. Marcia's throat went dry. Her voice came out small, uncertain. "Yes?" What he said next left her in shock. Before I tell you what happened that fateful day, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me, have you ever helped a stranger without expecting anything back? Also, tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to hear from you. But to understand why 500 bikers showed up at Marcia Dandridge's door, you have to go back. Back to a life that had been hard from the very beginning. Marcia grew up on the wrong side of the train tracks in Montgomery Creek, Alabama, a forgotten corner of a forgotten town where dreams went to die. By the time she was 16, she was already working double shifts at the local grocery store, handing her paychecks to her mother just so they could keep the lights on. There were no vacations, no new clothes, no school dances. There was only survival. At 22, she met a man named Deshaun who had a smooth voice and even smoother promises. He told her she was beautiful. He told her he'd give her the world. He told her she'd never have to struggle again. She believed him. They got married in a small courthouse ceremony with 2 witnesses and a bouquet of gas station flowers. 6 months later, Marcia was pregnant. And 6 months after that, Deshaun was gone. Walked out the door for another woman, leaving Marcia standing in the middle of a 1-bedroom apartment, holding a crying baby girl and a stack of unpaid bills. That was the day Marcia learned that the world didn't care about your dreams. It only cared if you could survive the night. Her daughter's name was Tiana. And from that moment on, Tiana became Marcia's entire world. Life didn't get easier. It got harder. Marcia took a job at Rosie's Diner, a rundown little place on the edge of town where the neon sign flickered like a dying heartbeat and the smell of fried oil clung to your clothes long after your shift ended. She woke up every morning before the sun did, walked 2 miles to work because her old Chevy had broken down 3 years ago and she couldn't afford to fix it. She dropped Tiana off at the neighbor's house, a kind old woman named Miss Lucille who watched her for free, and then she'd tie on her apron and work until her feet ached and her back screamed for mercy. The regulars loved her. She remembered every order, the truck driver who liked extra onions on his burger, the retired teacher who only drank decaf after 5 p.m., The construction crew that came in every Wednesday and always left her a $2 tip. But behind her warm smile, Marcia was drowning. The electricity had been cut off twice that year. The landlord had raised her rent again, even though the ceiling still leaked and the heater barely worked. Tiana's shoes had holes in them, and Marcia patched them with duct tape, telling her daughter it was just a new design. She went to bed hungry most nights, making sure Tiana had enough to eat, telling herself that tomorrow would be better. It rarely was. But Marcia never lost her spirit. She smiled through the exhaustion. She treated every customer with dignity, even the ones who left no tip and barely looked her in the eye. She held on to a stubborn, unshakable faith that somehow, some way, tomorrow might be better, if she could just survive today. And then came the night that changed everything. It was mid-December, the kind of cold that bit through your jacket and made your bones ache. The diner was nearly empty, just one elderly couple sipping coffee in the corner booth. The clock above the counter read 10:42 p.m., 18 minutes to closing. Marcia was wiping down tables, her body moving on autopilot, her mind already thinking about the long walk home in the cold. She was exhausted, bone-deep tired, the kind of tired that sleep couldn't fix. And then the door creaked open. Two small figures stepped inside, a boy and a girl, no older than 8 or 9. Their clothes were thin, soaked through from the rain. Their faces were pale, hollow with hunger. The boy's lips were almost blue from the cold. The girl clung to his sleeve, shivering so hard her teeth chattered. Marcia's hand froze mid-wipe. The boy hesitated in the doorway, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to be there. His voice came out soft, trembling. "Ma'am, do you got anything left over? We don't got money." The girl didn't speak. She just stared at Marcia with wide, terrified eyes. Marcia's chest tightened. She saw herself in those kids. She saw Tiana, waiting up late with an empty stomach while Marcia worked another double shift. She saw every night she'd gone to bed hungry, every bill she couldn't pay, every moment she felt invisible. She glanced toward the kitchen. Rosie, the owner, had already left for the night. Technically, Marcia wasn't allowed to give food away. One free meal could mean one less hour on her paycheck. One mistake could mean losing this job, and she couldn't afford that. But when she looked back at those two children, soaked, shivering, starving, she didn't hesitate. "Sit down," she said quietly, her voice firm but kind. "Right there, in that booth." The children obeyed, moving slowly like they didn't quite believe it was real. Marcia disappeared into the kitchen. She heated up leftover soup, grilled 2 cheese sandwiches, poured hot chocolate into thick ceramic mugs. She didn't just give them food, she gave them warmth. She smiled. She cracked small jokes. She asked their names. The boy's name was Eli. His little sister was Amara. And when Marcia asked them where their parents were, Eli's face crumbled. "They died," he whispered. "Car accident. 3 weeks ago." Marcia's heart shattered. "They'd been placed in foster care," Eli explained, "but the foster father drank. He hit them. So they ran. They'd been sleeping behind the bus station, surviving on scraps from dumpsters, trying to stay alive." Marcia's hands trembled as she set the food in front of them. Tears burned in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Not yet. Because in that moment, she made a choice that would echo across 15 years, a choice that would bring 500 bikers to her door. That night, Marcia did something she wasn't supposed to do. After the elderly couple left and she locked the front door, she let Eli and Amara stay. She pulled blankets from the trunk of her broken-down Chevy, the same blankets she kept for emergencies, the ones that had kept Tiana warm on cold nights when the heat got shut off. She spread them across the cracked vinyl booth and watched as the two children curled up together, their small bodies finally relaxed, finally safe. She sat in a chair across from them, her apron still on, her feet throbbing. And she watched them sleep. For the first time in weeks, they weren't afraid. Over the next few days, Marcia fed them in secret. She'd sneak them leftovers, soup that was supposed to be thrown out, sandwiches made from the day-old bread, fries that didn't make it to a customer's plate. She'd slip them hot chocolate when no one was looking. She'd let them warm up in the back booth while she worked her shift. She told Tiana about them. And instead of complaining, her 7-year-old daughter opened her lunchbox the next morning and handed her mother the sandwich inside. "For the kids," Tiana said simply. Marcia's heart broke and swelled at the same time, but she knew this couldn't last. Marcia was already drowning. The bills were piling up faster than she could pay them. The rent was 2 weeks late. The electricity company had sent a final notice. She was surviving on 3 hours of sleep and pure willpower. And if Rosie found out she was feeding kids for free, she'd be fired on the spot. No question, no second chances. But every time Marcia looked at Eli and Amara, every time she saw the hope return to their eyes, she couldn't walk away. She couldn't turn her back. Not when she knew what it felt like to be forgotten by the world. So she prayed. Late one night, after the diner closed and the children were asleep in the booth, Marcia sat in the dim glow of the kitchen light, her head bowed, her hands clasped together. God, she whispered, her voice trembling, I don't know what to do. I don't have much. But these babies, they need help. Please, please keep them safe. Even if I never see them again, just let them find someone who can give them what I can't. Her tears fell silently onto her apron. She didn't know if God was listening, but she had to believe he was. And then one morning, they were gone. Marcia arrived at the diner before dawn, like she always did. She unlocked the door, expecting to see two small figures curled up in the booth. But the booth was empty. The blankets were folded neatly. No note, no goodbye, just gone. Her heart sank. She stood there in the empty diner, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and felt the weight of it all crash down on her. She tried to help. She'd given everything she had, and now she didn't even know if they were okay. Did they find help? Did someone take them in? Or are they back out there, cold, hungry, alone? She would never know. And that not knowing would haunt her for 15 years. Time moved forward. It always does. But life didn't get easier for Marcia Dandridge. If anything, it got harder. The bills kept coming. The rent kept rising. Her body started to break down from years of standing on her feet, carrying heavy trays, working shifts that stretched from dawn to midnight. Her hands grew stiff. Her knees ached. Some mornings, she could barely get out of bed. But she kept going, because Tiana was counting on her. When Tiana graduated high school with honors, Marcia cried. Her daughter had done it. Against all odds, she'd done it. And when Tiana got accepted to college, Marcia made a decision. She sold her wedding ring, the one Deshawn had given her all those years ago. It wasn't worth much, but it was enough to help pay for Tiana's first semester. Then she sold the old television. Then the microwave. Piece by piece, she gave everything she had so her daughter could have a future. And Tiana thrived. She became the first person in their family to go to college. She called Marcia every week, telling her about her classes, her dreams of becoming a social worker, her plans to help people the way her mother had helped her. Marcia was proud, so proud, but she was also tired, bone deep, soul-crushing tired. Some nights, lying awake in her small, cold bedroom, Marcia wondered if any of it mattered. She was still poor, still struggling, still invisible to most of the world. She'd spent her whole life giving to her mother, to Tiana, to strangers, to two kids she barely knew, and what did she have to show for it? An empty house, a body that hurt all the time, a bank account that never had more than $50 in it. She thought about Eli and Amara often, wondered if they'd survived, wondered if they remembered her, wondered if that one act of kindness had made any difference at all. Most days she told herself it had, that even if she never saw them again, at least she'd given them one night of warmth, one meal, one moment where they felt like they mattered. But other days, on the really hard days, she wasn't so sure. Maybe kindness didn't change anything. Maybe the world just kept taking and taking until there was nothing left. Maybe she'd been a fool to believe otherwise. And yet, even in her darkest moments, Marcia Dandridge kept showing up, kept working, kept smiling at strangers, kept giving what little she had, because that's who she was. Even when the world gave her every reason to quit, she never did. And then, 15 years after that cold December night, something shifted. Tiana graduated from college with honors. Not just graduated, she thrived. She walked across that stage in her cap and gown, the first person in their family to ever hold a college degree. And Marcia sat in the audience weeping tears of pride and disbelief. Her baby girl had made it. Tiana became a social worker. She told Marcia it was because of her, because she'd watched her mother give everything to strangers, to neighbors, to anyone who needed help. She'd watched her mother choose kindness even when the world had been cruel to her. "You're my hero, Mama," Tiana told her over the phone one Sunday evening. "Everything I do because you showed me how." Marcia sat in her small kitchen, the phone pressed to her ear, and for the first time in a long time, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Maybe her life hadn't been wasted. Maybe all the struggle, all the sacrifice, all the nights she went to bed hungry, maybe it had created something beautiful. She'd raised a daughter who fought for others, a daughter who cared. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. It was a quiet Saturday morning when the world came knocking. Marcia stood on her porch, broom in hand, sweeping away the dust and leaves that had gathered overnight. The sun was warm on her face. The street was empty. Life felt ordinary, predictable. And then she heard it. A sound so deep it seemed to come from the earth itself. At first she thought it was thunder, but the sky was clear, not a cloud in sight. The rumble grew louder, closer. Her chest tightened. The floorboards beneath her feet began to vibrate. She stepped to the edge of her porch, squinting down the street. And that's when she saw them. Motorcycles. Hundreds of them. They poured into her street like a tidal wave of chrome and leather, engines roaring in perfect, terrifying harmony. The sound was deafening. The air itself seemed to shake. Marcia's breath caught in her throat as her small lot, quiet street filled with bikers, row after row, stretching as far as she could see. Leather jackets, tattoos, chains, the unmistakable insignia of Hell's Angels stitched across broad backs. Her neighbors began to appear. Mrs. Calloway peeked through her curtains, eyes wide with fear. Old man Henderson stepped onto his porch, his hand gripping the railing. Dogs barked from behind fences. The entire town seemed to freeze in place, caught between terror and awe. 500 bikers lined Marcia's street, and then, one by one, the engines cut off. Silence. Marcia stood frozen, her heart hammering in her chest, her mind spinning with 1,000 questions. What is happening? Who are these people? What do they want? A tall man stepped forward from the sea of leather and steel. He moved with quiet authority, his boots heavy on the cracked pavement. He reached up and pulled off his helmet, revealing a rugged face with deep brown eyes and a scar along his jawline. A woman stepped beside him, graceful, confident, holding a bouquet of wildflowers like she was walking into a ceremony, not a confrontation. The man's eyes locked onto Marcia's. "Miss Marcia Dandridge?" he called out, his voice steady but thick with emotion. Marcia's throat went dry. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Yes?" The man smiled, slow, trembling, like he was holding back years of emotion. "You probably don't remember us." Marcia's mind raced. "Who?" And then he said it. "I'm Eli, and this is my sister, Amara." The world stopped. Marcia's breath caught, her knees went weak, her hands gripped the porch railing to keep from falling. Eli, Amara, the two starving children, the cold December night, the soup, the blankets, the hope in their eyes, they were here. Eli's voice cracked as he continued. 15 years ago, you fed us when we had nothing. You gave us warmth when the world had turned its back. You were the first person who made us believe that people could be good. You saved our lives." Marcia's vision blurred with tears. Her chest heaved. She couldn't speak, couldn't move. Amara stepped forward, her eyes glistening. She reached out and took Marcia's trembling hand. "We never forgot you," she whispered. "You became our reason to keep going." Behind them, 500 bikers removed their helmets in perfect unison. The sound of leather and metal echoed through the street. And then slowly they bowed their heads, a sign of respect, a sign of gratitude. The street was silent except for the sound of Marcia's sobs. Pause for a second. Are you feeling what I'm feeling right now? Drop a comment and tell me, on a scale of 1 to 10, what's running through your mind. Marcia couldn't hold it in anymore. She collapsed onto the porch steps, her hands covering her face, her body shaking with 15 years of exhaustion, doubt, and now, finally, relief. Eli knelt beside her. Amara wrapped her arms around her. "You didn't just feed us that night," Eli said softly. "You taught us that kindness still exists, that people still care. And we built our entire lives on that belief." Marcia looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. I didn't know if you were okay. I never knew." "We're more than okay," Amara said, smiling through her own tears. "And we came back to show you." Eli stood and turned to face the 500 bikers behind him. He raised his hand, and they responded, engines revving once, a unified roar of solidarity. These people, Eli said, gesturing to the crowd, are my family, and they came here today because I told them about you, about the woman who saved 2 kids she didn't owe anything to, the woman who gave everything when she had nothing. Marcia looked out at the sea of faces, hardened men and women with tattoos and scars and stories of their own, and every single one of them was looking at her with respect, with love. We're here, Eli said, his voice strong and clear, to give back. Over the next hour, as Marcia sat on her porch surrounded by Eli, Amara, and 500 bikers, the full story unfolded. After they disappeared from the diner that night, Eli and Amara had wandered the streets for days, cold and afraid. They were about to give up hope when a man found them, a former Hells Angel named Marcus Bear Thompson. He was older, grizzled, with a past full of mistakes, but he had a heart that still knew how to love. Bear took them in. He raised them with discipline, loyalty, and the kind of fierce protection that only comes from someone who's seen darkness and chosen light. He taught Eli how to fix motorcycles. He taught Amara how to stand tall in a world that tried to make her small. And when he died 5 years ago, he left Eli his legacy, a network of bikers who live by one code: family first, always. Eli inherited that legacy, and he used it to build something beautiful: shelters for abandoned kids, food programs in forgotten towns, safe houses for runaways, all of it inspired by one woman who had fed 2 starving children in a cold diner 15 years ago. You didn't just save us that night, Eli said, his voice steady now. You showed us what humanity looks like, and we've been paying it forward ever since. Over the next few weeks, the bikers got to work. They renovated Marcia's crumbling house, fixed the roof, repaired the walls, painted the shutters. They paid off every debt she had: the overdue rent, the medical bills, the credit cards she'd maxed out just to survive. They even helped reopen Rosie's Diner, transforming it into a community kitchen that served free meals every weekend to anyone who needed them. Eli stood beside Marcia on the day the diner reopened, his arm around her shoulders. You once fed 2 kids who couldn't give you anything back, he said softly. Now 500 of us are here to give you everything you deserve. Marcia couldn't stop crying, not from pity, not from sadness, but from gratitude, from the overwhelming realization that after decades of giving, life had finally given back. For the first time in her life, she felt seen. That morning, as the rumble of motorcycles faded and the town of Montgomery Creek returned to its quiet rhythm, Marcia Dandridge stood on her newly repaired porch and realized something powerful. When you give from the heart, the world finds a way to give back. She'd started as a struggling black waitress with nothing but hope and a stubborn refusal to let the world break her spirit. She'd fed strangers, raised a daughter, sacrificed everything, never expecting a reward, never asking for recognition. And 15 years later, 500 roaring angels showed up to prove that no act of love, no matter how small, ever goes unseen. Because kindness doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need applause. It just needs to be real. Pain can make you bitter, or it can make you better. Marcia chose better. You don't need money or power to change a life, just the courage to care. And sometimes, the smallest act, one meal, one moment of warmth, can echo across generations. If this story touched your heart, do me a favor, smash that like button and share this with someone who needs to hear it today. And I want to know, what's one act of kindness you've witnessed that restored your faith in humanity? Drop it in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss stories like this, stories that remind us why we're here and what really matters. Thank you for watching. And remember, the person you save today might just become the miracle that saves you tomorrow. Because sometimes 500 angels show up just to say thank you.